All right, welcome everybody to this episode 63 of the Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I am Anthony Ewing, a partner here at Thoughtium. We go live every Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Central. Navigating Now is a platform for you all to share in those leadership topics, those business topics, those life topics that are at the forefront of the change that we are all going through today, particularly in business. And we've got another incredible leader here today to talk more specifically about the power of storytelling and why storytelling today means more than it ever has. And what are some of the tools that we can use as small business owners, as business leaders, to really leverage a great story and to tell our story in unique ways. Before we introduce our guest, I will cover off on a few housekeeping items. We want to thank everybody for joining the Navigating Now Roundtable show. Again, every Thursday at 3, we bring you all to the table to share thought, to share expertise. And we particularly want to thank those folks who have joined via our LinkedIn community. We love our LinkedIn folks. For those of you who are stopping by the live feed, please feel free to say hello or drop a question in the comments box. We also go live to YouTube. So those folks who are watching on thoughttium.com/live or on our YouTube channel, we welcome you and we would love to hear you say hello as well. We know a handful of you have registered via Zoom, so you have the opportunity to use the chat box throughout. We'll keep an eye on that. I also have a couple of questions from the team that we'll be asking our guest at the end. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest for today. You know, each week we bring such diverse new leaders to the table. And Mark Skala from Skalawag Productions is a storyteller. He's a business leader and an entrepreneur, and he's at the forefront of leveraging video to tell stories for and through your company. And as you all know, video, the platform, video, the tool to tell stories is near and dear to my heart as an entrepreneur. And it's really been the foundation of the way that we've built our community here at Thoughtium. And so I'm particularly and selfishly excited to welcome Mark to the table. Mark, thanks so much for joining us.
Everybody.
All right, so we will dive in here, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Hopefully, if it was not shared before. Oh, it wasn't shared before. That's okay. You guys didn't see the title slide for the first time in 62 weeks. I'm off my game. Mark, thank you for joining. Again, Mark is from Skalawag Productions. Mark started the firm. He's leading the firm today, and I know that you and your team are involved in all kinds of different things, not just video. Really, at the forefront of what you do is storytelling. But I want to start our conversation with a conversation on video, and we always love to introduce our guests by way of nostalgia. And we want you to think about your childhood. We want you to think about some of the movies that you watched as a child. And my question for you, Mark, is if you had to pick a 10-second or less scene in a video or a movie that you watched as a childhood that would best represent you and your superpower today, what would that be?
You know, I don't know if I can put a time limit on it, but I would say it's probably Willy Wonka.
Love that.
Like the golden ticket sequence, running home from the candy shop, and being just so excited about, you know, telling my parents and all the millions of grandparents in that home, you know, about the golden ticket, and then figuring out a way and all the mystery around it. I feel like that's like a very vivid sequence memory for some reason for me. Yeah.
So you had memories of actually running home from the candy shop as a kid, and you grew up in Chicago, correct?
I did.
So where specifically was this?
Oh, I grew up in Oak Lawn, so a southwest suburb of Chicago. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, same here. So I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and I can't remember the name of the actual but this was back when there were dedicated candy stores. Yeah. You know, when you couldn't just order it from Amazon or, you know, see it littered all over every, you know, CVS and Walgreens. Like, you went to the candy shop and it was a big deal. And oftentimes you rode your bike there when your parents didn't know. And, you know, maybe you took a couple dollars from the cabinet. But you really felt like you were in heaven walking through that candy shop and being able to choose kind of your own adventure and taste and walk out of there with friends and trade candy, etc. That was an experience. That was a vibe for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Willy Wonka. We'll maybe come back to that at some point, but appreciate you sharing a little bit of that nostalgia. Because at the end of the day, you know, we are all made of people in our lives and stories. I've said that forever, and as I mature as a business leader and as I mature more personally, I realize that stories and storytelling are at the heart of everything that we do. And oftentimes they're the most influential aspects of our life in terms of the way we look back and commemorate people and events. So tell me a little bit about the role storytelling has played in your life prior to starting your firm.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's a story in everything we do, which I feel like is a little cliche, but at the end of the day, we're trying to think through all the time, like, how do we make sense of the world? And often how we make sense of the world historically has been through storytelling, or through making up our own stories, or passing on information over generations, right? And so the medium is important in how you tell the story, but at the end of the day, the story is the thing that matters, the takeaway, right? Like, so when we're thinking about the takeaway, the lesson, whatever we're doing, whether it's a book, whether it's a movie, whether it's a piece of content on Instagram, we're trying to always be conveying what message we're trying to sort of telegraph to people, right? And so when we think about this, when we think about it as a career, it's always been present in everything we've read, everything we grew up with. It's just looking for it and trying to make sense of it, and understanding the people, the resources, what is the conflict, the emotion, what is happening in these things. And so that's sort of how I think about storytelling when in childhood and beyond. It's always, it's ever present no matter where you go. You just have to look for it sometimes. Did we freeze?
Those people could tell. So
Hey Anthony, I think you're cutting out a little bit.
sorry about that.
The internet strikes again.
Mark, are you there?
I'm there. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Wow. Yes. I apologize. I think we're dealing with a little bit of some internet issues. So if we drop off, we'll just try to connect again. Such is the life of video, right? Where you have to deal with these things, no matter whether you're going live to a whole audience or not. So we were talking a little bit about the role of storytelling, and I was just commenting on how in my career, in my life, some of the most effective people were people that could really tell stories. My grandfather being one of them, sitting around the table. This was before we had an iPhone or a camera in front of our face all day. His ability to connect with people was through stories, sitting at his kitchen table. And because of that, I think I've established quite an appreciation for storytelling. And now video has become this accessible, predominant platform for telling stories. My question, Mark, before we get into Skalawag and what you do is, why are people still so hesitant to use video today?
I think the short answer is it's complicated. It's complicated to do. There's a combination of this idea that, like, oh, I can tell a story, I can tell a joke, I can tell a memory, right, to somebody. But when a camera gets involved and you have this technological piece as well as sort of the narrative piece, that's all of a sudden like, oh, this is a lot to worry about. Because it's just like you said, like, because the camera stopped recording for some reason, or because this happened,
Yeah.
and it throws you off when you're just sort of talking to people. This is something you've practiced every day and every day. And I think that's the lesson is, like, how do you get started, right? that's how you have to think through. Like, you have to practice, you have to fail, just like any other skill. Any other, like, brands have to figure out where their voice is, what the right stories are that they're supposed to be telling. And I think often why brands don't start is because they look at it and they go, oh, I got so much other stuff to do. It's too much. It's too much to think about,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so, like, that's where I would say where I see a lot of the hesitance is, like, getting started is either too much of a time investment, it's too hard, or it's just not the biggest fire to put out, essentially, or priority to think about.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I think there's a perception that video is hard and it's time intensive and it's cost intensive. And I wonder if, we collectively have been realizing and learning over the course of the last really 5 to 6 years how not only accessible video, the format has become, but also the kind of collective expectation for quality and post production has gone down a little bit. And I want to talk about like the good and the bad of the bar potentially being lowered with the advent of live streaming and of course the pandemic the last few years. Like, everybody's using video, everybody's going live, and I think because of that we've lost a little bit of that appreciation for like a well produced piece of video. But I think it's also welcomed more people into leveraging video in ways that they thought you would need a production team and you would need Final Cut and you would need post production. So tell us a little bit about, I mean, just the positioning of video and maybe the fact that more and more people are using video and its effects on our collective bar for video quality.
I'm going to quote one of my old mentors, and I don't know if he made this up or somebody else did, but everyone in America has a PhD in watching television, right? So at the end, I won't comment globally, but at least in the States. And the idea that, like, everything needs to be super produced, overproduced, however you want to frame it, versus whatever's in your pocket, is something that I think that is part of the hesitance in some ways. But also, like, as things have gotten more accessible, it's opened the door to, I mean, like, you can look at TikTok as a really good example of, like, content being the thing that matters, right? It's not about production value. It's about stories in some way. It's about being funny. It's about being sort of finding advances in how you can use a new tool to your advantage, to get to smash likes and things like that, but also, like, trying to just create a presence for yourself, to tell your own story in a lot of ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I don't think about, oh, there's so much more access to video, therefore I'm worried about, like, our business. It's more, how can you as a brand leverage all of the spectrum, because you need it all. Like, it's not just pro or not pro. It's like, how can you test things at a low cost and DIY it until you figure out what works, and that's when you can start to look at, like, investing in video, right? So and even when you do invest in video, it doesn't mean that you stop doing the other thing. This podcast is a great example of, like, leveraging content and making the content be the thing that matters. It doesn't matter if we're on $5 million cameras or not. Like, no one cares, right? And so it's all about the place you're watching. So when I'm watching something on my phone that's supposed to be from the perspective of someone just sort of, like, talking to the world, right? Sort of like the behind the curtain vibe, right? I don't have that expectation in my mind that I need the food stylist and, like, the polished, pristine image, right? So my brain shifts. And that then when I get an advertisement, I know I'm being advertised to, and I'm okay with that in some cases, and I'm not okay in some. And then you can get into, like, targeted audience and, like, targeted advertising, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I think there's room for all of it, and as brand, like, from a brand perspective, you have to leverage it all, because there's certain costs that are involved. But, like, it's like email marketing, like DIY video is free in a lot of ways, right? Like, how can you make the content, content is king, right? Like, that's the age old saying. That's true. That's just blatantly true. And if the content is good, it doesn't matter as much how pristine it is, depending on how you're displaying it to people and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I agree. And we have a whole host of independent consultants, coaches, freelancers out there that tune in, and I have found as a consultant myself, and as the leader of a small business, the ability to leverage video to tell your story. And it might not be your brand story, but the story and the process of building a business, the story and the process of hiring a team, some of the trials and tribulations of just a growing organization. I've seen that be so effective in small businesses, and I think we're starting to see a little bit of that kind of lifting of the curtain or that internal storytelling at the larger scales as well too, which I think is also super super exciting. I mean, you see now leaders of organizations that have teams of folks that are recording them almost around the clock, and showing kind of how they lead, and some of the decisions they're making within their organization, and it's allowing people to connect with not just brands but with entire companies as well too.
Yeah, it's being, in some ways it's being an insider, right? Like I want to know how the sausage is made, right? And
Yeah,
it feels real. And there's varying degrees of if that is real, but like at the end of the day,
right.
like you start to develop sort of an understanding of what content you like, or if you're okay with it being fake, just like reality television, right? Like it's real, it's not real,
Yeah.
understanding when it's the right time to pull the curtain back and show people. And sometimes brands are like traditionally against that because it shows like vulnerability, or
Hmm.
something that maybe is like not necessarily a trade secret. You probably wouldn't go that route, but like trying to understand when the right time is to showcase the human side of your business, or just the human side of you. Like you said, it doesn't have to be the brand story. It can just be, hey, you see this all the time with like athletes opening up about like mental
Yeah.
challenges they face. Like that stuff is real, because what's happening is you're creating a connection. You're creating an emotional connection. And that's essentially what you're trying to do with stories, any story that you tell, right? You're trying to
Hmm.
drive action, or just connect with people emotionally. I would argue it's the same thing as like breaking bread around a table and getting to know somebody, right? And
Yeah.
telling stories there. Those human moments are the thing that make us, I think, special, and also develop deeper connections with people.
Yeah. I love that. So let's elevate a little bit, because I could get lost in this very like tactical practitionership of your work, and I'm sure we're going to go back there before the end of the hour. But tell us a little bit about Scalawag. I'm so interested in your business model. Tell us about some of the brands that you work with, and maybe what differentiates you from some of the other video production shops out there.
Yeah. At the end of the day, opening up my own video shop was a pipe dream in college. I graduated college in 2008, which is not a great time to graduate any sort of higher institution to try to look for a job. And I realized, and I have a degree in multimedia, so whatever that means, right? So I have proficiency in a lot of different areas, and I was trying to scrape by and figure out um, what to do with my life. Video was always the focus, but at the time, like 2008, 2007, 2009, around there is when the DSLR revolution started, and all of a sudden things were possible that weren't possible before. I can't even start to tell you the weird contraptions I was shooting with in college and earlier in my career to try to get film look, and then all of a sudden the DSLRs came out. I was like, oh my God, this is what we've been waiting for, right? And so basically, long story short, I was really lucky and got a job at Northwestern University. I was running an academic production like group there, doing everything from promo videos to sort of like massive open online courses as that started to emerge. I went to Jordan to shoot like a documentary promo on an NGO. It was a cool job, and slowly over time I built this business on sort of the nights and weekends, and it got to the point where I was working two full-time jobs and
Mm.
was not sustainable, and made the leap officially in 2015 to start this. And it really hit the ground running. It didn't, there's definitely been some hardships over the years, but at the end of the day, like it was like, oh, this is a real thing I can do. This is not like a crazy lark that I'm going on. This is something that's, it's the right time to start building. And we've built everything very methodically in terms of like adding employees. We're a team of 5, so it's a small creative team. We've worked with everyone from craft and larger ad agencies like Leo Burnett and VMYLR and things like that, to smaller situations with like, we did a whole series of there's an event company that runs craft beer festivals where we developed a series of like Yeti based commercials with this wacky thing. We've done work with Simple Mills and Chomps, like food companies in Chicago. Food and beverage is what separates us from the rest of the pack. That's where we live, right?
Mhm.
I've always been really fascinated by one process, how things work, how things are made, and also hospitality. Like how do we find those human moments? How do we think through uh, being good to one another, and be good partners to sort of navigate what is the most appropriate way to do something. So one of the things that separates us is we do something called a strategy workshop, which rather than sort of blind bidding on projects on a loose creative brief where no one really knows what they want, we go through a process that sort of helps, sort of a discovery period where it's like, what are you really looking to do, right? And so that sort of like strategy workshop, planning, uh, guide-based approach that we have is very unique in the video production space. I think you see it in other marketing
Yeah.
spaces. It works. And basically, how do we create a customized plan for you to create content, whether that's one single project or content over the course of a year or two, right? How do
Hmm.
you sort of think through that? We are the partners that help you think through that, then execute.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I, I can relate to a little bit of the way that you're differentiating. We're a very similar, small 10-person consulting shop. And whereas some of the larger consulting agencies that would come in would offer their services a little bit more off the shelf, a little bit more templated, and maybe even at times a little more cost effective or cost efficient, I should say. We come in and almost require a strategic effort up front. And oftentimes, our clients will ask, what is this about? Like, why do we have to go through this strategic process? And we say, just you've got to trust us a little bit. You've got to. We will invite you into that conversation, and we can assure you that almost immediately you're going to start to see some opportunities that you didn't know existed outside of your very specific request of us to come in and deliver X. And so, that process for us, it's not necessarily at the front end of every single engagement, but it is very quickly moving in that direction where we create the space for a little bit of strategy prior to anything that we do. And that definitely comes through in your portfolio, and I even saw it on your website as well too, which really excited me. So let me ask you, Mark, as you're working with these F&B brands, when I think food and beverage, and I think like rich multimedia, I think Instagram, I think still photography, um, I think really good commercials. What are some of the ways that you're challenging these F&B organizations to think about their brand outside of a really good Instagram handle?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, the core of it is like, how do one of the, like, to go back to hesitation on investing in video, like on the pro
Yeah.
side at least, a lot of people have it in their heads that like, oh, we're going to go spend 20 to $30,000 on a video, maybe a brand story, whatever, and it's just gonna live on our website, and that's it, and that's great. Like, that's a thing that you should have as a brand, and it makes a lot of sense to invest in that. But like, how do you make that stuff work beyond just that investment,
Yeah.
right? How do you start to create content for Instagram, for Reels, for TikTok, for Facebook, for targeted paid ad campaigns? How do you take core content and repurpose it? And what we found is like that is sort of the bread and butter of what we do and why we need the strategy session. Because if we're able to sit and plan and strategize with you and understand what the brand's goals are, what the left hand and right hand are doing, and where video can fit in, because video is not your marketing plan. Video strategy is a part of your content strategy, is not the whole thing. And so how do you slice and dice things to make that investment way more, like the ROI in that investment go way further
Mm.
than you would if you were just to invest in a single video, which was sort of like the approach like 5 years ago, right?
Hmm.
I think now we've seen, how do we create great partnerships where that value, that problem solution mindset, the trust is there, and we're able to say, well, actually, you can have high quality at a good value because you've invested in our process to say, we know we can shoot this way in order to get you 20 extra deliverables because we're strategizing with you ahead of time. Whereas if we're just showing up with cameras, that is, you might think that that's how it works, but it's not. And that's how that's
Hmm.
where you run into issues and sink a bunch of money down the toilet.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So your value prop is allowing people to see, their video strategy above and beyond like a single, like asset by asset, and
Exactly.
more so putting a strategy in place that allows them to create great stories, chop them up, repurpose them, retarget them in ways that matter most. Again, I'll say this again. I mean, I've been saying this a lot recently. Like, there is no better time to be a small business brand in terms of our ability to tell stories very efficiently and very effectively with a bare bones team or a bare bones budget. I
Yep.
mean, you know, we're a 5-year-old firm. We have a 70 episode video podcast. We have a YouTube channel with some good and some mediocre video content. And we are now starting to develop some higher end, offering specific promotional video that could potentially be leveraged in more of a paid format. We do all of this without a single dedicated headcount to brand development, or let alone media production or post production. Right now, I'm the camera guy and the interviewer and also the post producer, and I absolutely love that work. But when it comes time for me to offload that or transition that to somebody else, I still don't ever see us bringing on a dedicated team. What it takes are people that know how to tell stories, within the organization, a great external partner like yourself that can, help our vision make a reality. But what I'm not worried about is spending $20, $30, $40,000 on a video, because that's not even the way that we would want to set things up. And I'm assuming that's the way you're coming in and positioning yourselves.
Absolutely. Well, and it's again that blend of not everything needs to be pro. Just because I run a professional video production company does not mean I'm going to say, oh, you need to up the quality on that. Because one of the things people should be thinking about is like video. We often talk about the spectrum of like simple to complex, not bad to good, right? Because yes, things that are more complex are more expensive often, but you can create great content with webcam and that's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a microphone. And so how can we lend our expertise to let you know what is a good resource allocation for pro video and what's a good resource allocation for sort of DIY, right? Like how do you create this stuff? So not everything needs that sort of high-end touch. Some things do, some things don't. And we're there to sort of help you make sense of it all, right? Because this is where we can sort of help you. And another thing that happens often is sometimes what they'll do, like brands will do, is they'll create a bunch of content, whether it's with influencers or in-house, and then they'll say, here you go. Can you just cut this up into something that makes sense? We have systems in place. We do this all the time. It's very easy for us to just sort of slice and dice, create a system, a template for the show, and here you go, right? And that's where brands could potentially find efficiencies in that model. And it's really just about knowing where to allocate your resources to different buckets of media creation, content creation.
I'm curious, with the work that you do across a couple of different industries, what has been one of the most surprisingly effective executions of a brand leveraging video? And maybe a project that you've worked on that you were like, wow, I had no idea this was going to take off the way that it did.
Yeah, there's two that come to mind. One is this was a project that will never happen again for a lot of reasons, but it was like if I had to encapsulate the pandemic into one project, we did a project with Other Half Brewery in Brooklyn, and they came to us and said, hey, we want to do something different for our beer festival that we can't have, called Green City. Right, and every year they change the theme of Green City to be a different one. This year it so happened to be a broccoli, like a civilization of broccoli people who like to play video games, and that was the theme of the beer festival. And they a marketing company that we work with and share our studio with, called Stout Collective, created this whole package of really high-end beers that then the brewery brewed. It was all video game themed with all these different weird characters that we created. And we pitched them basically a 3-hour fake public access telethon, where we worked with live improv actors to basically live improv VO. We bought a giant broccoli headpiece. If you're ever on a video call with us in our conference room, the custom broccoli person headpiece is sitting in the director's chair. And we worked with 20 different contractors in 8 different states to shoot different content that was all pandemic appropriate. And it was the most bizarre project I've ever gotten paid to do. And it was very, the impact of it was cool because this was in September of 2020. So things were still pretty hairy. And there were hundreds of people sitting here for 3 hours watching this crazy crazy stuff. It's on YouTube. You can check it out. Just go to
I love it.
Other Half's website or YouTube page, and it's bananas. It is super wacky, not always appropriate. There was amateur wrestling that it was bizarre. And then some other stuff is really just like when brands take advantage of templating content for value and then testing, right? So like this idea of like really trying to think about A/B testing, especially when it comes to paid ads, and understanding what performs, and then doubling down on the thing that works. Like that's the thing that people don't do enough of, is just understanding, thinking through like, okay, I'm going to try this and this, and I'm going to see what my customers are resonating with. And I know that this is these are brand unaware people. So we're just trying to sort of either catch their attention or let them know about us, that sort of thing. And it could be something as simple as like a stop motion food-based thing that's more glamorous or interesting. And one is maybe more of a human element, and different audiences are going to respond to different things. And so the smart brands are thinking about doing small form tests and then investing in the things that work, and then
Sure.
So those are the things that I would say have really been interesting to me too. From like,
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I'm totally gonna have to check out that. I
it's
still don't I still wouldn't understand how to explain it. The Broccoli Project. I'll call it the Broccoli Project.
it is bananas.
It sounds like it. So let's say you're working with a small business that has a $50,000 budget. They want to get started in video. I'm curious as to who would you recommend needs to be at the table for a solid, let's call it small budget video strategy, because you all are the producers and kind of the strategists. What I've also heard is that you might need SEO and social at the table. You could potentially need somebody internally within the organization that is fully dedicated. Like, what's the dream team for a small business that's on a smaller budget?
What you'll hear from me in any conversation is that there is no one right answer for that question. And
Okay.
every single project, like every single piece of content we create, and this is one thing that I think people don't always understand about video, is custom. Like there's no templatization for higher end video production, right? There's certainly techniques that you learn that help you with that. But at the end of the day, when you're trying to formulate a team, it's such a collaboration of what you're trying to achieve goals wise, that you need the people that either have veto power or need to have a voice in what's happening, or are responsible in some way for the performance of the content. So sometimes that is SEO people. Sometimes that's outside agencies that will bring into the strategy session. Like, what have you learned from the situation? Sometimes it's the CEO. Sometimes it's just the marketing team. Right. So it just depends. And this is something that we work through ahead of our workshops to say, hey, who are the appropriate people to talk through here? Then we'll ask some questions to sort of get to the bottom. It's like, oh, does this person actually need to be in? Because you don't want so many cooks in the kitchen that it gets crazy, but you need people who you don't want. What you want to avoid is somebody coming in later and saying, I hate this. I had no voice in this. What are we doing here? And then blowing up a bunch, you just pissed away a bunch of money. Right?
Yeah.
Good for anybody. So how do you sort of create that customized team for what you're trying to do? And usually what it is, if you have 50K and you're trying to sort of start getting your feet wet in all these different phases of video, you're looking at a couple core pieces or core series of content, and then leftovers, things that are just sort of like cinemagraphs, GIFs, things that you can create out of other things that can be used in multiple areas. But usually it's a combination of the sort of director of marketing, some sort of marketing coordinator role. There's often a social media arm. Sometimes it's a paid ad person or someone who's in charge of paid social or paid advertising, depending on where people are dipping their toes. And then understanding if people above that sort of level, like the C-suite, need to be involved. And that depends mostly on how big the company is.
Yeah. It's we say in our line of work, if there's ever an external partner that comes in and says they can do it all, you should take a second look at it, right? And we remind ourselves that as well too. Like, as much as we want to come in, we do strategy work, we do learning and development, we do coaching. As much as we want to come in and say we can take that on and we can do the process from start to finish, oftentimes our clients respect when we bring additional partners or added resources to the table that allow them to get the whole breadth of specialization that you would need. And I can imagine for something like video, you're going to need a couple of different people at the table. Um, Mark, I will switch gears a little bit. I'm curious your thoughts on what is, TikTok and Instagram stories doing to our taste buds or our taste for video? Like how is now, 2 to 3 years of this short form, TikTok, Instagram Reels, it was Vine back in the day. How is that shaping our palette for video? And I have some thoughts, but I would love to hear yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's making us, well, one, I think, what do they say? Like 82% of the internet traffic in 2022 is, or 80% of 2022's internet traffic is going to be video, right? So like, I think I
Yeah.
think if anything, it's making us thirsty for more, one. Whether
Mm.
that is sort of serialized TikTok content, social content, or any content. At the end of the day, video is the best medium to communicate your message in a lot of ways, right? And I
Mhm.
think it's making us hungry to create more, to consume more. I'm not sure if those two things are a good thing for civilization, but it's a good thing for like positioning our business in a lot of ways. Like the more video
Yeah.
people consume, like the more there will be a need for what we do. But I think it's a matter of, like, I think it gives people a better understanding of tiers of content and how not every single thing is the same. Because I feel very strongly that once people try to create a crew, a production, like a professional video production, they realize really quick that it is not the same thing as creating a TikTok
Hmm.
with your phone. But I'm a big believer in creating with whatever you have available, and that content is the dictator of how something does, right? And if it doesn't
Yeah.
need to be super soigné, super pristine and bokeh filled to be effective or interesting or fun or want me to engage with it, right? Like you look at
Yep.
memes in general, those are mostly garbage, but they're hilarious and they're amazing.
Yep.
And they teach you lessons in own ways and help you connect with people on top of it. So I
Yeah.
think it just makes us thirsty for consuming more, and also I think it keeps us curious, and it's especially keeps me
Yeah.
curious, and to see how some of these TikTokers are literally like changing the game with just their phone, and I think
Yep.
that's fascinating. I'm not threatened by that. I'm super into it personally.
I'm so fascinated with this whole movement. I mean, if you were to take, if you were to take even myself 10 years ago and you were to sit me down, and this was maybe the first iPhone, pre-social media, pre-Facebook and Instagram on your phone. So maybe it's 15 years ago. And you were to put 2021 Instagram on that phone, and particularly Instagram Reels, and you were to sit me down and say, okay, you're going to spend the next hour and 47 minutes flipping through vertically 10-second or less videos, and you're going to be captivated. Like you're going to miss breakfast in the morning because you won't get out of bed because you're flipping through. I'd say, and I would try it, and I'd say you're absolutely crazy. But how many times do I find myself today now, again, with just the palette as evolved as it is and short form being predominant? I mean, yeah, I'll lose an hour and a half easily on completely meaningless Instagram Reels. So I'm fascinated with just the behavior of it. The other thing that I'll say too is, I feel like there's an argument to say that with everything as kind of short form, low fidelity point of view as video has become today, is there not now like almost a premium on that really solid, like higher grade piece of video that we maybe didn't have before? And it's almost like I think about movie trailers, for example, right? Today, every movie trailer is short, it's low fidelity, it's the movie's maybe not even in the theaters, it's in Amazon. I mean, we're seeing them kind of left and right. But every once in a while there's like a James Bond movie trailer out there that goes old school. It has like the green, intro. It's a true like 3.5 minute, beautifully produced, probably a couple $1 million to make trailer, and I'm watching it like I never have before. So is there that type of a premium now that's placed on the high, the more highly produced video content, and could it potentially stand out almost like the Super Bowl ads? Why would you want to spend so much on Super Bowl ads?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you're trying to think through what is the best way to allocate resources as a brand, but also
Yeah.
like thinking through like what am I actually watching? Like, is this? I feel like people like cinephiles get really hung up on like format, And like, I think if you were to talk to me 15 years ago, I'd be like, vertical video, what is it? I only do, it's like 15 years ago.
16 by 9.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like just happy to not be shooting 4x3 like 8mm cameras, you know, so I think I always go back to story and content should drive a
Yes.
lot of the decision making, and also audience. Where are people watching this? And so if you're trying to sort of jam in what you think the best format is for people, you're going to fail, because you need to meet people where they are, and you need to meet them with content that is actually relevant or
Yes.
and I don't even think length matters in a lot of ways. Like, we talk a lot about like short form being good, but it just depends on what you're trying to achieve. Because people who are, I'll just give an example of, like, I was trying to fix my stove, and I watched a YouTube video that was the worst video I've ever seen. But you know what? I fixed my stove.
But it worked.
I watched all 30 minutes of it to fix my stove. And so it's about like, is my audience hungry for what I'm putting out there? And in listening to your audience to see what they want is another thing I don't think brands do enough. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's where my head went.
No, you did. I mean, I love that you continue to bring us back to this concept of the story, and the ability to tell the story is king. And the creative and the distribution are the variables. And it's almost like, you know, there's a lot of conversation about, you know, how Instagram is this predominant platform, but what if it goes away, and what does it do to the influencer culture and society, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the message that you're telling us all as brand developers is not to be indebted to a very specific format or platform, to really focus on the story. And those stories will be timeless. I mean, again, I think I shared with you prior to the show that one of the biggest influences on myself as a marketer and a brand developer is the work that Gary Vaynerchuk and VaynerMedia have been doing really over the course of the last 10 years. And he's been shouting that story from the rooftops, in terms of, don't focus on the platform, don't focus on the format, focus on the content, focus on the story. And a lot of his content is still so popular, and it's not dependent on a single piece of software or social media platform. Which is, I also go back to, I think, your value prop at Skalawag, which I think is very similar to ours, which is, you need that upfront strategy session or two to help people understand that we're not designing for a very specific square or circle. We're designing for a story that can live in the squares and the circles. And again, I think that's a really unique aspect to the way that you do business. And, you know, it sounds like your clients really value that.
We found that just like the experience on both sides is better. And like, why wouldn't you always strive for that? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And, you know, it's really interesting to think through like this idea that like partnership or like just sort of turning the old model on its head, where it's like, you know, traditionally you've got, hey, I either have a brief, or like people have come up to me and was like, hey, how much does a video cost? And it's like, well, if you're to come up to a general contractor and ask them hey, I want a house, how much does it cost? It's like, well, do you want marble countertops, or do you want like laminate? Like, those are two different costs, you know, and all these things sort of build together to make any piece of content. And it can be low cost, low scope, high cost, high scope. It is all about this planning session. And we've just found that it's like, oh, we like doing all the work better because we've worked through all the issues before we started to roll cameras. So we don't have to talk about like, oh, we need to reshoot this because somebody wasn't involved and then like really needed to say this one thing. We've worked through all that. So and then the other thing is, we're giving you a plan ahead of time. Here's the plan. Here's what you're doing. Here's where your money is being spent. Because often people can't visualize video or can't yet visualize video in the same way they can photography or even graphic design in a lot of ways, you know? And so like, that's the problem, is like, how do you cut through the ethereal nature of creation in the video format and help people visualize it and be their guide to, there's no reason they should know how to make a video. I don't know how to make a delicious snack. Well, that's not true. I do it not on a mass-produced scale. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, there's so much that goes into it, and we're just there to provide value, to try to solve problems, and also to keep people accountable to what they originally set out to do. We're not yes people in this regard. We will tell you what we think, and I will give you pros and cons to each decision and help guide you. But like, we're not going to just be like, yeah, that's what we'll do. If I think it's a bad spend of money, I will tell you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And always keeping those goals in focus, and the story and the sort of context of what you're trying to achieve. That's the name of the game for me.
Yeah, I love that. Tell us a little bit about, where Skalawag is headed. What are you guys thinking about in terms of, the next few years of your business?
This is the first year that I've done a lot of work like on the side, really thinking through like what are our mission, vision, and values. Like, I've been a practitioner of video and a director and a DP, and I've done it all at one point or another. And so like I know how to create video. That's not the hard part,
Yeah.
these days. The hard part is like understanding how to build a business, a profitable business on top of being a creator. I think creatives are often like people pleasers. We want people to like what we create for them. And you're not always in control because that's so subjective there, right? I think the strategy workshop helps mitigate some of that stuff. So where we're headed is trying to, like what we call our big effing goal, is trying to become the #1 food and beverage content studio in Chicago, right? So that's the next 3 to 5 years. How do we become the go-to resource for food and beverage brands in Chicago and beyond? Really just like we want to have a presence here, but we do also a ton of work outside of Chicago as well. And so especially with the pandemic, we have a very sophisticated Zoom camera feed set up. So it doesn't really matter where you create from these days. It's about, are we the right fit to work with you? And every decision that I think about from a business perspective, from a creative perspective, a lot of the times it's coming back to that goal. Like, is this fulfilling our goal to become this #1 content studio? And it's not just video. We also have sort of a sister brand that integrates photo into the equation, where integrated capture at high quality, at a high value, using the strategy workshop format, like that allows us to really create a ton of content for a really good price. And I think it sort of lends itself to the nature of the industry now, where you're seeing brands go away from big time agencies. I think big time agencies will go to the place. There's a lot of value there, but also I think brands have seen that there's other avenues. There's a new way of doing things where you don't necessarily have to have that crazy overhead, especially if you're not like Coca-Cola, right? So that's how I think about that.
If you were talking to a solopreneur that's out there, they just started their business, they want to get their story out there, but maybe they don't necessarily have the means to bring in, a video production shop. Like how would you encourage somebody to getting started with video?
In terms of from a brand perspective, I think the biggest thing is not being afraid of failure. And I think this is a good entrepreneurial lesson no matter what. But like specifically when it comes to video, don't be afraid to, one, pull back the curtain, and two, just fail. Like if something goes wrong, technically, if something goes wrong, you stutter, whatever it is. Like, I mean, it's really important to just like keep testing, seeing what people respond to, and focusing on that, not oh, I did this wrong, or it could have been that. It's always going to be better. I'm a maximizer by nature. Like everything could be better. Most of the work we create, it's like, yeah, that would have been better if I did this. That's just how my brain is wired. But at the end of the day, you have to be unafraid to just put yourself out there. And with the news cycle, with how content is consumed, people will forget about the failures. They'll remember the thing that resonated with them, and focusing on that will help you in any marketing strategy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that, and I'll add on to that. As somebody who's really grown into storytelling through video, the #1 lesson that I've learned, and the #1 piece of advice I would give anybody starting with a video strategy of their own, is reps. Like more than anything, more than written form, more than any other platform, I would say video just requires reps. So, I mean, I'll never forget when we first went live. I was working with a friend, and I was trying to get this thing set up across a couple of different platforms. And there was only one way to actually test and see if this was working. And it was actually to go live. And I'll never forget hitting that button and like looking out into my LinkedIn community and saying, I guess we're live. And, had I taken to heart some of the missteps that I made in the first 10 episodes of this show, or even the first, 15 episodes of our vlog, I mean, I would have quit a long time ago. And you start to realize that it just takes reps. The reps allow you to fail. The reps allow you to learn, and I've heard you say it a couple of times. The reps allow you to hear what's working and what's not. The reps also allow you now 70 episodes in, when the internet goes down and everything goes haywire, my blood pressure stays at a reasonable level, and I'm able to just jump back on and
Oh,
roll with it. And that allows me to produce more video content like this at scale without being so reactive.
yep.
And that's a gift. Like, video has been such a gift for me as a creator and as an entrepreneur, because it's really, I mean, I almost liken it to, I don't have children, but I have a lot of friends that do, and they talk about just your need to, just show up and like be there, like constantly, and try. You're going to continue to try and fail, and the kid's going to continue to cry until like you figure out what the kid needs. It's that drive around the block or whatnot. Video's the same way. Like, it is a kicking, screaming platform until you kind of figure out how to control it, how to manage it, and that takes reps.
I love that. I actually think it made me think of like an anecdote I talk about when it comes to child raising and also any entrepreneurial thing. And it's like this balance
Yeah,
of making really great wine. It's like it's
yeah,
minimum intervention, enough intervention to support and like grow, let the natural essence be the best it can be, but enough intervention where it doesn't wither and die.
yes,
Yeah,
I
that's
love it. Yeah. That is live video is an absolute like ornery 2-year-old for sure.
yeah,
I can attest to that.
yep.
Um, okay, last couple questions. What are some of the resources or tools that you particularly are like really into right now, that you're getting a lot of knowledge or inspiration from? Things that you're reading, or YouTube channels that you're subscribed to?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, from like a personal level, like I think there's a lot of really cool like sports breakdowns in the YouTube sphere of like
Mm,
high end YouTube setups. And one of the things that fascinates me, and actually we're pitching this to a client who I won't name, but like this idea that like you can fabricate this style, because everything is just an aesthetic, right? So like people have developed, like you develop your own aesthetic of how you want to portray yourself, and it can be super high end, super low, and it doesn't matter. But like, how do you hybridize those things? And this is where the
mm,
conversation around TikTok gets really interesting, because people are like, well, can you make TikToks for us? I was like, well, we can, but like, we need to talk about like a lot of stuff before we can get there. Whereas if you just have someone who's proficient in TikTok making some weird stuff on their phone, that might be better for TikTok in some ways, right? So it
mm.
just depends on the medium. So how do you continue to hybridize styles that you learn from people really at the cutting edge? And like, what can I learn as a professional in the field where I'm maybe like a little bit more grizzled? How can I stay curious about what the young whippersnappers are doing like in
Yeah,
TikTok? That is like, when I watched it, I was like, that's cool. That's like legit cool from a production perspective, like a
yeah,
creative perspective. Like, how can you hang on to those things to incorporate them into your tool belt? Because as you get really
love
proficient
that.
in your craft, like you just need to keep absorbing. You're never done learning, right? Like whether it is technical or sort of just more like thought based, like you have to stay
Hmm.
curious. I think that's what's cool about consuming content. Cause like I'm usually, when I'm consuming content, it's like I want like narrative fantasy television shows. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like I want
yes.
fiction, because I don't watch a lot of reality TV per se, but there's always something to be learned. And actually I like watching services like Hulu where there's ads, because I'm always like, oh, that was interesting. That was well done. Or it's like, this is awful. Like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
am I thinking? And so like trying to think through, it's not just like ignoring the so-called amateurs or like non-professional content creators. Like what can we learn from them? And how can we just keep like creating cool stuff and pushing the envelope that's going to help people at the end of the day?
Hmm. Are you guys paying attention to NFTs at all? Like, is that going to start to creep into the work that you're doing? Will you have clients that are looking to mint, specific pieces of video content?
No, not yet, but I do think
Okay.
it's coming. Actually, I think where this space is really like an overlap is you see a lot of animation 2D motion graphics companies.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
do 2D motion graphics. Like we have a motion designer on staff and he's interested in NFTs. We haven't done anything with the business because there is these sort of like, and frankly, it's because I want to understand NFTs. I've really tried to understand NFTs. And I'm not there yet. Like I think I
Yeah.
have a decent handle on crypto and that movement. But NFTs is like, I'm still a question mark. So I'm still looking for, if someone has that magic solution to like help me sort of have an aha moment with NFTs, I'm in. I'm paying attention to it. I haven't figured out how it works with us yet,
Oh, I love that. All right, can I give you two anecdotes? We're going to go over the hour, but that's okay. Let
Yeah.
me give you two anecdotes because I mean, challenge accepted. I mean, anyone that wants to give me the challenge of helping them understand NFTs, I'm gonna go in. So two quick anecdotes on this, and one that might be a little bit more overlapping with your business, one that's totally not.
Mhm.
One of the applications of NFTs that we're really curious about are brands that develop an NFT that provides consumers different levels of access to the brand or to the leader of the brand. Actually, Gary Vee just did an incredible job of demonstrating this. He created a conference, a physical conference that everyone will go to in March of every year. The tickets are NFTs, so you have to purchase a ticket through the NFT, and depending on the level of NFT that you bought, you get different levels of access both at the conference and outside of the conference. So if you bought a certain level of an NFT, you might get him on your podcast for 30 minutes and you get to go to the conference. If you bought another level of the NFT, you get to jump on a group hangout with him once a quarter and talk shop, and you get to go to the conference. So it's people are buying tickets to the conference, but they're also buying access to Gary in perpetuity for a lifetime. And that's why these things are like $60,000, $70,000.
Right.
The other application that is super interesting to me, did you collect baseball cards growing up?
Yeah. Yeah.
So collected baseball cards, and there's a company, I believe the name of the company is Autograph.io. Tom Brady's behind it and a few others, Tiger Woods. And they're essentially creating, more digital versions of baseball cards. And if you can imagine, there's a reason why the Honus Wagner baseball card is worth millions of dollars because there's only one of them.
Right.
Well, NFTs allow for that level of exclusivity, and they are starting to allow for or to enable these digital baseball cards to include things like 30-second highlight reels, video highlight reels that are updated on an annual basis and things of that nature. So I'm starting to understand more through some of these just really elementary applications of it. And it's totally outside of like, buy this pixelated, image of a monkey with a hat on for $5 million. I don't understand that one.
Right. No, and you've got me percolating now because it's like,
Okay.
I don't think I realized it went that far, and I maybe I just was like not curious enough, right? Like, which is something we can all be guilty of. But like, yeah, I think that's really fascinating to think through like how can we? I'm just so fascinated by this intersection of like how can we make things more interactive, right?
Yes.
So this is like the obvious AR VR type of interaction, whether it has a commercial lean or just a sort of experience lean. NFTs as like a way to buy access to people for life, which sounds weird, but like like that is fascinating. Like how did these things fundamentally change the world, like the internet did in a lot of ways, right? Like how do you forecast that? How do you keep, again, I think it just comes back to curiosity. How can you stay curious enough to keep up with this stuff and know what's a good fit for you or what's not, or how you can incorporate business ideas to leverage this or to solve solutions or solve problems for your clients, whatever it is. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Mark, I know we're a little bit over time. Actually, I think this is the first time in history that I've like intentionally gone over the hour. I was just so geeking out about our conversation. And I love this conversation more than most because, this is like practitioner to practitioner. Like you are in the work with your team, and I can just tell, right? Because you get lit up about some of the granularity of the work that you do, and you also get lit up about what's the future of my organization and potentially what's the future of NFTs. These are the conversations that I love the most, and I just want to thank you so much for the energy and the insight that you brought to today's episode.
Right it back at you. This was great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So, Mark, as I'm bringing up the next guest, tell people how people can find you and how people can look more into Skalawag Productions.
Yeah, you can visit us at www.skalawag.com. We're on the gram at Skalawag Productions. It's Scala with a K, so just know that. Other than that, we're getting into our own TikTok and content creation channels now that we have more people that can help us through it and create some stuff that's a lot of fun. But if you just Google Skalawag Productions, you'll find us.
Awesome. Thank you again so much, Mark, for joining us. This hopefully will not be the last time that you're on the show. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
And the conversation continues next week. We've got another great leader at the table, Dr. Harriet Lewis. She's the founder and principal at Sense Development. She is going to be talking a little bit about DEI for your organization. Dr. Harriet Lewis comes to us with a lot of experience, not only in the DE&I space, but also in just how to build and scale culture within organizations. So a very relevant topic with a very relevant leader. We look to bring you these topics, these leaders, each Thursday at 3 p.m. Central. You can find out our schedule of events at thoughttium.com/live. That's also where you can tune in every Thursday. We hope you all have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you next Thursday. Bye now.